Welcome to the Edge and Flow podcast. TJ Schwarz here. I'm hanging out with Lucas Burnley, and it is the last episode of the year. We're recording on the 30th of December, 2022, and we think it's probably a wise idea to do a little bit of a recap for both of us on what we did this year and also what we did together, which the podcast was 6 months of this previous year, and kind of recap how that's been going.
Yeah, maybe a little industry recap too. What
Yeah.
we saw. We really slid this one in under the wire.
Yeah.
It's good. Feels
Down
good though.
right at the end.
I
At
know.
buzzer beater.
Six solid months.
Yeah.
That's pretty big because we were talking about this for kind of off and on for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that it's actually happening and has been happening, I think that's pretty cool.
And I think this is episode 21 out of 6 months. So we're not quite hitting, let's see, like 8 would be every week. So not quite.
I'm gonna take it, man. I think that's fantastic.
Pretty good. It's pretty good
for everything else that's been going on. I think it's really solid.
Yeah.
Where do we start, man? Like, do we start now and work backwards, or we just start in the back and work forwards?
Give me some highlights of your year. Give me some
highlights of the year, man. Honestly, a lot of it really blends together. I guess this is the first year that we've felt really settled in the new shop. Okay. So the keystones there were finalizing. Like, I got my Kaiser compressor up and running and my surface grinder, which that put me back exactly where I had left my last shop. So that's like kind of, I don't know, feels minor because it's like a couple pieces of equipment, but overall like workflow and just like peace of mind.
You moved in 21.
We moved in 20.
Yeah.
So man, it's crazy. The stuff takes
fast.
time.
Yeah.
It goes fast. So, okay. Shop finalized, made the decision to kind of pull back on shows, but also be present at shows. So we both did 2 of those, right? No, 1.
Yeah. We went to both blade
shows.
No,
we went to both. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we went to both. That actually feels like a pretty big step because it's something that had been in the back of my mind for a while.
Yep. And not exhibiting,
just going for, social element and like to spend time with people. I think it proved the concept for both of us, which is like, there's value in just being there. What else, man? It's funny, like put on the spot now. Like, I feel like I can't remember anything. Oh, got my smithy area up and running.
A little blacksmithing.
That's another one. Back in 2019, I took a 2-week forging course, like introduction to bladesmithing, and it's been like slowly building since then. And I now have like a fairly respectable hot work area. You realize like though how many like small tools you need. Like every time I do something, I'm like, like a swage block and like a leg vise and
that's just like support equipment. Anytime you go to do anything, it's like all the little things. I mean, it's just that's why you see like old timers in their shops. And they have like drawers on shelves on like everything. It's like, oh, I need to go do some soldering, and they get a shoebox down. It's like they got their copper soldering stuff. They got their flux. They got the propane torch and some handmade tool for that and wire brush. Like it's just
and it's not stuff you use all the time. Yeah. We were just talking about Christmas, like holidays. So I did like the shopping for the like family Christmas this year. And you realize like sometimes you're just like, I'm buying like a flat of chips, not because they're all going to get eaten. It's because like, you're going to want a bag of chips. Like it's the same thought process, right? Which is like, there's some key tools that when you do need them or want them, they just make so much sense. Here's a question before like little rabbit hole. If you had to like gut response, like a budget for a new tool, like the side items, what percentage of a new tool purchase is that? Or anything like shop setup where you're like my smithy, I realize, okay, so like those tools, like probably like $20,000-$30,000. Like I probably could have spent another like $4,000 or $5,000.
Yeah. I was going to say 25% maybe.
25%.
Yeah. Like it's kind of like a lot of guys who do like engine swaps in cars. They say like budget it to the T as best you can and then add 30% because they're saying you're going to forget 30% of the stuff. Same thing I'd say is like budget it out as far as you can and then say like 25% more than that.
Yeah. Just a little bit of bleed. Even like I've been doing towards the end of the year, a little bit of like jewelry work. And I feel like that margin holds. It's like you buy your materials, you buy a couple of key tools, and then it's just like 25% is right there. Just budget it out of the gate. All right. Other high points. I don't know, man. You've been with me this entire year. Any high points that like stick out for you? Anything that you can see?
I would say earlier in the year you and I were working together. It actually predates the podcast. We were on Zoom calls all the time, and you were learning CAD.
Yep.
And we were kind of working
specifically
together on
Fusion.
Yeah, and that kind of led almost to the podcast, the fact that we were doing the Zoom calls on the CAD.
Yep.
And I feel like it seemed to me like it's kind of a high point for you possibly because it was kind of like I could see you getting into CAD, and you've talked about moving forward with like more advanced CAD skills.
Yep.
And it's agree. Like it seems like a seed was planted this year for you.
Well, and that maybe, right? It's not a finalized thing, but it's the start of something important, like that changes the way I work moving forward.
Can I make a confession?
Yeah.
I've talked previously on the podcast about like extolling the virtues of Fusion, right?
Yep.
I have been designing a few different projects recently, and I realized I prefer designing in SolidWorks because of it. And it all comes down to the way that the sketches work.
Interesting.
Feels better to me, but I don't actually know if it's because of my like many thousands of hours in SolidWorks, and maybe it seems like a more direct connection for me to be artistic. And so I've actually been for months now using Fusion for everything except the initial design phase. So like the modifications, cam, like textures I'm doing in Fusion, but I'm actually doing the initial design layout in SolidWorks. And
I actually think that's more common than people let on sometimes. I think especially as you move through different programs, I think your mastery of one is hard to shake. Like we talk about Rhino a lot. I am by no means a master of Rhino, but I'm comfortable making it do what I need to do. Even just with Fusion, it's like I would almost rather sketch in Rhino and then import it and start doing my modeling. So
I'm also kind of thinking that I almost think like Fusion needs to work on their sketching a little bit. Because I couldn't tell if it's like, am I just being like subconsciously biased towards SolidWorks because it feels more comfortable artistically, or is there actually like kind of some friction and static with Fusion? I think there might be, because like when I sketch lines, I click and drag lines. So I lay them in rough and then I click and drag and move lines to get it to where I want. And if they're like tangent lines, when you click and drag in SolidWorks, it kind of like all the other lines kind of like stretch and flow in like a more organic way. But if you click and drag in Fusion, it like kind of breaks. And so it's like,
that makes sense.
It's like you can't, it's like, I like, it's almost like I'm pushing and pulling on clay with the sketch. But in Fusion, it's like, you have to almost like delete lines and like redraw them where you want them, and then delete them and then redraw them, or like, it's kind of hard to
feels cumbersome.
Like mold it with like, it doesn't feel as organic. I don't know. But I would say that's just one check against Fusion right now. But I know that they are the kind of company that seems to be fixing things and like improving all the time.
Sure seems like it.
If they could get their sketches, because I know a lot of things, like the knife making is a very specific thing. And when Fusion's looking at their clientele, like if you're drawing more geometric, like holes, chamfers, cuts, and like pockets and stuff that are like very parametric and geometric, it's every bit as good as SolidWorks. But with a knife, you don't really want it to look geometric necessarily. Like I'm trying to make it look organic.
You don't want it to be all geometry driven, basically.
And it's just less organically minded than SolidWorks.
Interesting.
So I don't know.
I'm getting ready. That's the beginning of next year. I'm going to go hard in CAD.
But for you, one of the things is you do a lot of sketching.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to turn a sketch into a model, it's very, very good. So
hands. What TJ means is hand sketching.
Yeah.
TJ is a beast and just sketches on his computer,
right?
Which I can't do. So I go from paper sketch and basically start as that as like a framework.
Yeah, right. And so like in SolidWorks for years, I don't sketch anything on paper. Maybe I do, but it's only an exercise. I don't even necessarily bring it in to the computer. I just look at it and kind of get an idea,
use it as a
feel,
point,
and then just sketch free flow in SolidWorks. I've just found that in Fusion I can't free flow ground up blank sheet design very well with the way that the sketch kinematics are.
Interesting.
Whatever, but
that's a pretty big one.
Bit of a digression, but that's seems like it was a seed for you that I hope blossoms.
Yeah, and it just right now it's just continue. Like I realize we talked about this a little bit this morning. Like I realize that CAD, like more robust CAD, is where I want to take a lot of what my business is doing. Mm-hmm. The forging and like the more kind of analog metal work is really something that I want to do for me. And for a while, it was kind of in the middle where it was like I was doing both, really focusing inside the business. Now having that as like an kind of an out, like I guess a side, like not really a side hustle, but for lack of a better term, just the ability, like some creative outlet, I think is allowing me to really see like, okay, like I can actually start to shift, like even the design work that I'm doing for companies and stuff, like there's no version of that isn't improved by a more robust model.
Right.
So I'm excited. That's going into next year.
Awesome.
Yeah, man. I feel like a lot of the stuff for me this year was kind of minor adjustments, small improvements to a system.
Nice.
So yeah. What about you?
Dialing it in.
Yeah.
Well, the beginning of the year, February, had my son. So that is can't top that. So I love the knife industry, but there's nothing going on in work life that's going to top having my son.
That's a big one.
That's awesome. He's been growing, so it's been fun to watch. And then, but on the work side, this year was the first full year of like performing as a full blown like knife making operation. I've made knives in the past. I've kind of here and there made knives, but this was the first like 365 days of like making knives full bore, albeit with a lot of little hiccups because I had, bought a new machine. I had to put sheetrock in my shop and run air, like all kinds of times where my shop was like torn apart.
Yeah.
But I was making knives the whole time. And so I probably going, just to be transparent, like I probably went into 2022 with like, maybe I'd built like 50 knives in my life before 2022. And then in 2022, probably built like 800 knives or something like that.
It's a little bit of a difference, man.
So
when did the first CNC land? When did the Tormach land?
It was actually, I had it all of 2021.
Okay.
So I only made, like I started making Overlands in 2021.
Yep.
But I probably only made like a couple dozen.
Yep.
It
was all like process development and learning. And you had never run CNC before this. So, I mean, this is huge.
Yeah. 2021, I learned how to use a CNC. Yeah. And I had a lot of, I've done a lot of contract work in the past where I'm not like licensing designs, but I'm literally doing CAD work as like a contractor. And I tapered all that out in 2021. So that's all gone. So 2021 was like learning CNC and like cutting out projects that aren't focused on my shop.
Yep.
And so 2022, like I said, was like the first year where I like knew the CNC, started making full bore, started like just, full steam ahead.
Yep.
And I'm really happy with how it went. Like I'm actually looking back, like I kind of am surprised that it went as smooth as it did with how much it seems like I had to do to get it around the corner. But yeah, I'm really happy. It was good.
That's solid. And you added a CNC machine.
Added another machine.
Yeah, you're running 2 now.
Yeah.
You are now on your second model.
Third, if you count the scalpel.
Third, sure. I guess, yeah. Like of like the archetypal designs.
Yeah.
Right. So you're on your third model. That's like pretty big, man. So you're going to roll into next year with a new model.
Yeah. Basically. And the Overland and the scalpel were designed, I believe, in 2021. I know the Overland, but I believe the Scalpel also predates 2022. So I didn't launch, or I didn't actually ship any knives except for the ones that had already been designed this year. It was like all I had time to worry about was like improving the shop and the process. And now I'm pivoting into like different designs because I can, reuse what I've learned and reapply it. So 2023, I'm just really looking forward to it.
Yeah. It's interesting because like the kind of your wins this year were like big, like overarching kind of.
Well, it was just it was like the biggest
year.
Pivot of my career was 2022.
Yeah,
for sure.
And mine are like they're like these just small. There's like small little adjustments, like
course corrections
and that I think that course corrections, refinements. I think that over time, it's fun to kind of alternate those, right? Like you can't be in a growth state 100% of the time, and you don't want to just like sit back and not grow.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah. No, I'm happy. It was a whirlwind year, just like they all seem to be nowadays.
What a year!
Yeah. So,
jeez.
But I'm really happy that you mentioned the state of the industry. Like selling direct to customer obviously has changed the feel of the industry for me. And it's like, it's just been cool to have my hands like on the pulse where I'm like shipping direct to customer. And it's cool to see like the life of the industry. It just, I've never felt more connected to like the customer base. And it just seems healthy. Like you always hear like a little bit of doom and gloom here and there about the economy and stuff. But I look at the knife industry and I'm just like, man, it'd take a lot to tear this apart. Like this is strong. You know what I mean?
Solid. I mean, that's why I'm always preaching diversification. It falls into that category, which you have. But I think if you look at this industry as like your calling, or I guess what's the correct term for this? Like a vocation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is your vocation. I really think that like if you are a complete CAD designer, I think there's a huge amount of value in actually making a product and selling it to a customer. You learn something different. If all you're doing is making your own product and selling it to customers, I think there's a lot of value in working with a company on your designs, or at a minimal level, like working with dealers and their customer base. And like, you just learn different flows. You can kind of pick and pull from things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Man, there's a lot of really good, really inexpensive knives this year. That's what I'm seeing. That's like an overarching like industry tone.
Yeah. Right? Quality's really getting up there
quality's getting really up there. In a way, like you look at it and you're like, man, that's like, there's some intimidation factor. Like it's scary, but I feel
competition's heating up.
Competition's heating up. I feel like there's a lot of area for brands to improve. And that to me is exciting because I think it makes the overall industry better. But yeah, man, it's like every time you look, there's like some new company.
Yeah. Feels like the number of not necessarily individual makers, but like actual startup companies seems busier in that space than ever before.
Like the micro brand, right? Like going to an OEM manufacturer with a design, having them produce your design and then releasing it as like some type of small knife company.
Yeah. And when I came out in like 2012, or when I started getting into the industry, I remember it felt like custom knife makers as individuals were popping up all over, like left and right. But it seems like there weren't that many people like going as far as to create like a quote unquote brand.
Right. It was like custom makers that had been in for a while that were then taking some of their designs overseas and doing production runs. Now it's like there's a point
being brands popping up. Like
there's brands popping
right
up.
out the gate. Yeah.
That aren't maker driven. So that's like, I think we'll continue to see that. Yeah. I think we'll continue to see that.
Yeah.
And that's where I think like, the brand building side and the story and the community that goes around the brands, I think is really, really important. So yeah, man, I don't know. Lasers are super cheap. There's that.
Right.
Right. I feel like that's changed quite a bit. Like the price of tools and the availability of machinery right now.
Yeah. CNCs.
Man, never a better time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like brand new high feature rad machinery.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
for instance, I have a laser, a fiber laser that I'll say it was $36,000. You have a laser that can arguably do 99% of what mine can do. And it was like, how much?
2,700 delivered.
Did not exist a couple of years ago. That's wild.
And yeah, it's the technology side of it, because like I said, in 2012, all the custom makers that were coming out is like they're buying belt grinders, band saws, drill presses. That was like, there was a lot of Instagram maker types that just had like the big three tools in their garage, the classic. And now it's like the technology has trickled to the affordability level of like CNCs in garages
as your first tool.
Yeah, and it used to be kind of like absurd if you just first thing you did to make knives was like instantly just bought a CNC. It was like,
unless you're like retired tool and die maker or like that's like it's like you're in. But I mean, you're a great example of this. Like, you had a little bit of knife making equipment, but the CNC was really where you started making like numbers of knives.
Yeah.
So now it becomes like, I always talked about the big three, which is the belt grinder, the bandsaw, and the drill press. You can start a shop now and those become support tools.
Yeah.
They're not the big three anymore.
The CNC it's almost like there's a big four and the CNC is one of them.
What are the big, so if you had it now, it's like, okay, is CAD a tool? Would you consider it a tool? It's not like a tangible, like,
I would call it more of a skill.
That's a skill
more than a tool.
But that's that's a hard one, right? Because if you bandsaw, grinder, drill press, you have to have a skill set to use those.
Yeah.
Okay, so CAD is the base skill set.
Mm-hmm.
What are the big three now?
Honestly, it depends on what you're trying to do. Like, it depends on what you see this as. Is it is it an experience you're looking for?
Your big three.
Are you trying to build a business? Are you trying to like set your family up? Like, are you trying to, is this a side hustle and you love your day job? I don't know.
Don't need the money.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. But like
for you, what are if you were to look at it, like what would your big three tools be?
I would say day one, start learning CAD. Because CNC is not going to work that well for you if you don't have something to go on in CAD. Like, you have Rhino, you at least have that. Like, you have to have something. I probably wouldn't buy a CNC until I had like a reasonable amount of CAD experience. So it's like, if I would say like CAD experience, get like a few months of that, spend some serious hours, late nights, get that figured out. I would almost put CNC on the very top of the list for the first thing to buy, I would say. And then right next to it at the same time, you're going to need a belt grinder, a 2x72. I think
need it. You always
I think it's critical.
Yeah, I do too.
The drill press, no, like you don't need it.
Don't need it.
They're
fully.
so cheap that you probably should get one.
Right.
Like you can get
it's
a
not
good
a big
solid
three.
one for like $300.
Yeah.
But it's not like a pillar anymore.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be drilling holes in knives that you have made on a CNC. You're just not. Like, the only thing I use mine for is Kydex, and even that's on the CNC now. So CNC, belt grinder, and you got to figure out finishing, whatever your ideal finishing is. For me, it's like sandblaster and tumbler. It may be your like satin finishes, but sandblaster's way up there. Because you can
you could pick one or the, if you had to pick one or the other.
Between what?
Between a blaster and a tumbler.
For me, they go together because I always blast and tumble.
Have top three.
Top three. Blaster.
Blaster?
Sandblast first. Because you can do finishes that don't require tumbling in a blaster.
But you can also do finishes that don't require blasting.
You can, but it's less versatile, I think.
Okay.
I don't know.
I think that's a tough one. Deburring.
Blast cabinet first. Cabinet first, in my opinion.
So there you go. Times they are a changing.
But yeah, CNC. See, I feel like this year taught me I waited too long to buy a CNC.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a friend of mine today, actually Ben Peterson, and I was talking about CNC machines. And what did I say? It was like, I feel like CNCs are really intimidating to people that haven't used them. Like, if you just look at it and you see like this crazy space age robot, it's really intimidating. I know I was. I think I was so intimidated that it prevented me for like at least 3 or 4 years from going out and buying one. And I think people have this feeling of like, I want to get familiar enough with it where I'm not intimidated and then buy it. I think you're always going to be intimidated by this thing until you are in front of one. You know what I mean? It's like if you've never driven a car, until you learn how to drive, it's going to scare the crap out of you.
Totally.
So first step, buy the CNC, put it down there. You got to start pressing buttons. You got to jog it around. You got to start playing with it. Like that's the only way to get that intimidation out. So the fact that you're intimidated is not a red flag not to buy it. It's the reason to buy it, you know?
Fair.
And you got to be able to afford it. I mean, you don't go buy a CNC like praying that it's going to pay for itself in the first 6 weeks. Not going to happen. Took me a year to get it all up and going, profitability wise.
Yeah.
But you got to buy what you can afford. If it's not much, like if it's a simple, even a 3D printer is a CNC machine, technically.
Yeah, I was almost going to make the argument that a 3D printer at this point, because they're so inexpensive.
Yeah.
It doesn't directly relate to knife making. I mean, it can, but it's not going to be finished product, right? For the most part.
Yeah.
But it's such a skill builder.
You're probably right. Maybe buy the 3D printer as the very first thing, and that be a bundled part of learning CAD because they kind of go together.
Yeah, yeah. You're getting like the would be like a cognitive link essentially. Like like once you're like working with like stepper motors and like and components, you start to see like, oh, okay, this is like XYZ, like that's what that means. Like okay, you have a framework to like move forward on. Okay, another big one for you. Hold on.
Okay,
this one is actually a really big one for me. You went with a machine that like was kind of it's like I say it's a gamble. You were very confident in it.
Oh, I knew it was a gamble, but I was.
But confident. It's a gamble.
Yeah, you're right.
We are how many months into you having the Sile?
I think it was end of July, mid July. So what is
call
that?
It 6 months.
5-6 months.
Yeah. All right. So give us an update on it, man. Any regrets?
No regrets.
Okay.
Does great. It's a amazing machine for knife making.
Okay.
I can see where it would not work well for certain things.
Okay.
If you are going to machine billet aluminum with large MRR, material removal rate, probably not the machine for you, nor is any machine of this weight and size, that like the mini mill or whatever.
Yep.
Because its biggest limitation, and I find this not when I'm making knives, but when I'm making fixtures, is it just can't handle MRR, like high feed.
Right.
Because it vibrates. You know what I mean? And so I highly recommend something else. But if you're trying to build like handlebar clamps for Harley Davidsons out of big chunks of aluminum, you got buy a Fadal or something that's way more rigid and slower if you can't afford like a VF2.
Yeah.
But for this, the speed, accuracy, performance for knife making, it's a knife making beast.
So I'm basically still on the hunt. And trying to figure out if I stay brand loyalist to Haas or if I make the jump. So you still are of the opinion that you would be comfortable with me making the jump to Sile?
I think so. Yeah. I think you would like it.
Okay. It's cool seeing more and more of them pop up and like seeing like kind of as problems arise, how the company's handling it and stuff.
If I wanted a bigger machine, I would go Haas because Sile makes bigger machines.
Right.
But as soon as if I was going to go for a bigger machine above what I have is the X7, like that, they have an X9 and an X11, I would go Haas because at that point you start to lose the advantage of Sile, which is they build a really, really good small CNC machine that I think I haven't run a mini mill personally, but I think I would prefer it to the mini mill from what I know.
Sure.
But I don't know that I would prefer like the X11 to the VF2. I think I'd rather have VF2.
Right. There's a best value proposition where I see like with Sile, I really feel like the X5 is providing something that like doesn't exist because you could do like an office mill.
Yeah.
The X5 is like a little bit of an intermediate step between like the office mill and like the super mini, but it's like a third of the price.
The X5, like if you're looking for a CNC machine, you don't know where to start looking at the X5 today. Yeah. That machine is a knife maker's delight. And I have the X7, which is a little bit bigger, but the X5 came out like right around that time. And holy cow, that X5, like, because it's similar to mine, it has a lot of the same attributes, but it's even smaller, but it's the same weight, which is really helpful. Holy cow, dude, that X5, like, yeah, man, what a machine.
You could almost fit two X5s in the footprint of the X7. Is that
not quite? So
not
the
quite,
X5
but close,
is
right?
don't quote me on this. The X5 is like 39 inches wide. You heard me right. 39. That's like the size of a door.
Yeah. This
And
thing is small, and it's 16 tools.
16 tools. And the X7 is like 56 inches wide.
Yeah.
So it's not like way wider.
So I could fit two X5s in the footprint of my Haas TM1P.
For sure. And that's
probably
a TM1.
Smaller than.
Probably smaller.
Yeah.
And compared to like a VF2, it's probably realistically, you wouldn't want them this close for functional reasons, but like three X5s would fit inside of a VF2.
And they're not deep either, right?
I think they're a little bit deep, but they're narrow. I think they are a little bit deep.
I'm like on this hunt right now. Like I realize the way that I work has changed so much over the years. Like I want all the functionality.
Mm-hmm.
Like at some point, I would love to get a CNC lathe to play with. Like I realize a lot of the equipment that I'm getting or that I'm interested in is actually just around like learning it and being able to apply it, but it's not production based. I want like the lab out of Blade Runner. I just want to be able to build weird stuff.
Yeah. No, and Sile's working on a lathe. So they haven't announced any details, but they've just posted like teasers. Yeah. So I'll be curious on that. But like I someday could see owning an X5 as well. But they're affordable enough for me where it's like with scaling, as I scale, like it's almost like if you're serious about being a knife maker / manufacturer, like a VF2, you can like palletize and you can have like back spacers, scales, blades, all this like laid out on this table.
Yeah.
For the price of a VF2, like that's loaded decently, you could get 3 X5s, put them in the same footprint, and you have a backspacer one, a blade one, and a scales one. Like that is kind of
you got a machine that's only running composites.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Dedication.
Yeah. Well, that I think. So I went for my power hammer. I went with an Anyang. Right. It's an import hammer that's brought in and gone over by. Oh man, I'm gonna blank on his name. James Johnson. Anyway, I saw that like the other option is to buy an older machine that is like refurbed or you refurb it yourself. I realized that in my working lifetime, like being able to buy a new machine that does everything I need it to do and is not a project, man, is so valuable. So it's like I bought my first CNC used. I have no problem with buying another used CNC, but at the same time, I'm like, man, if you can spend, short money, walk into a brand new machine that's going to do everything you need it to do for 5 years or 10 years, it's probably a really good value proposition.
Yeah.
Because they're consumables. I mean, they really are.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. I mean, like Sile, I think in the information, it's like we rate this at a 5,000 spindle hour machine. Yep. Like just build your business model around use 5,000 hours on the spindle, then sell it used. And if someone's more of a hobbyist, they can rebuild it. They can do whatever. But in a production shop, I don't know.
Oh, that's a good question to try and figure out.
But I wouldn't say that 5,000 hours. It'd be like a Ford
like
saying
5,000 hours, like lights out,
100,000 mile warranty. It's just it's going to drive for a lot more than that. But it's just kind of like if you're a manufacturer, just like 5,000 hours, swap it out, like just as a matter of practice.
That's interesting.
So, but like in 5,000 hours, that's a lot of knives. You know what I mean? Like I've built all these knives, and I think I have like 160 hours on my machine.
Yeah.
And it's like, shoot, at this rate, it's going to be years and years.
Yeah. Well, and that fits in, right? So you're 6 months into that machine.
Yeah.
So say 300 hours a year.
It depends on how you're running
something like that. Yeah. I mean, and then you add another machine, and so that hits that 5-year mark real easy.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Interesting. Sile, win. What else?
Well, let me think. I actually did not have 2 knives or any knives come out with CRKT this year, but I have some coming, and those are exciting. Like 2 weeks away now. So a little teaser.
What do you attribute that to? I always call them like black hole years, where it's just like something happened and the timing doesn't line up, and you realize you didn't submit.
So it was the product cycle, as you know, is 2 years. So it's 2 years ago that I had a gap in designing knives for CRKT. It wasn't really that intentional, but this was, I believe, we got married and had a kid that year, and also bought a house.
Yeah.
And moved, and I think bought the CNC machine in the midst of all that. So it was kind of like this crazy year. And so it was like I had multiple designs come out the year before and multiple that are coming out after. So it's like it averages out, but it was like a catalog gap.
For me, it's like one of the worst feelings.
Yeah.
I did the same thing when we moved back east and had Bo. It was like you get done and you're like, I haven't submitted anything, man. Like and you realize it, and there's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
You missed a whole year.
Missed the bus.
Yeah. So I got a black mark.
Yeah. And so that brings up a good point. So that I would say was a disappointment this year. It wasn't because of something I did this year, but it was something I did 2 years ago. But did you have any disappointments for this year?
I was thinking the exact same thing, man.
Yeah.
Were there any like big losses?
Yeah.
It's interesting. My losses this year, I feel like tie in pretty well with my successes or like my growth.
Mm-hmm.
They're small realizations or like they're things that are shifting. I don't think there was any like big failure.
Mm-hmm.
Actually I do have one. This one really actually hurt. Last year was like a developmental year. So we had moved in 2020. We're like finishing the house, getting settled, all this stuff for 2021. We did big home projects. Like we did like a huge landscaping project. And there's been a few times in my life where like, I literally can't look at money. Like the only way out is through.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way to finish is to like spend your way through.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like I say only, there's always an option. Like you can stop dead in your tracks, but I started this process. I had to finish it. I so grossly overspent last year in terms of what I paid in taxes that I had a big, very painful tax bill that took me the first 6 months of the year to square up on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough.
It's one that like I would like to never do again. It's happened to me 2 times in my career. Like I think probably 13 years ago or something, I had like a good year where I just like wasn't paying attention. Like my bookkeeping wasn't great. It's like money would come in, I would spend money. And then at the end it was like, estimated taxes did not actually cover that. So, the win from that is becoming even like much more dialed. I felt like over the last couple of years, our process was good.
Mm-hmm.
So I give last year a pass because I didn't really see a workaround.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do everything in my power to not do that again. It cost.
Yeah. Yeah. So. I've said it before, when you're self-employed, it feels like you're swimming in the water full of sharks.
Yeah.
Because there's all kinds of things that can kind of get at you.
Yep.
And the biggest, baddest shark in the water is the IRS.
Pay your taxes.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us, we don't have a financial background, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not like, I like money a lot, but it's not my prime driver.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's easy to just kind of not look at some of the math that really matters. And in this case, I did that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yep. You gotta square up with the IRS, like face to face. You gotta win that fight year by year. And
I like the idea of paying yourself first and the IRS second, but it's like those two, like you got to pay yourself.
Yeah.
Right. There's no reason to do this if you're not, but man, like, and the way that we do it now is like ultimately a percentage just comes out every time I do a withdrawal and it just goes into a tax account. Like even at the end of this year, like my CPA reached out and was like, hey, here's your year end. And it was more than we had thought going in.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a win. As long as you have the money to pay it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I've made kind of a joke before that it's like that shark analogy. It's like, it's almost like every business bankruptcy or failure is the last nail is always the IRS. It seems
Right.
like it's like you're getting picked at by all these factors, but the one you're paying attention to all the other little sharks, and you lose track of the big shark, and the big shark is what kills you every time. You know what I mean? Because it's like it could just be your business model's bad, but what actually pushes you off the cliff is the IRS at the end of the day. And it's like the hammer that strikes. You know, like the game over.
I know, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting.
I just try to respect it.
Yeah. You that's all you can do, right? You got to do it. Like for me, I had the idea of paying taxes on your business, like, was never really a thing. Like I look at it, I'm like, the first CPA I ever worked with was like, look, I've done this for whatever, 30 years at that point. And she was like, the businesses that try to get over go away eventually. And she's like, I realize there's probably exceptions to that rule. She's like, but the companies that just constantly are kind of on a, probably, and this is probably like a scale thing on a small level. She's like, if you're trying to cheat, she's like, you're focusing on the wrong thing, and it means your business isn't running right. She's like, run your business right, pay your taxes, and that's how you're successful. And it just like really stuck with me. So like, I always had pride in the fact that like I just pay my taxes.
Yeah,
you know,
I agree. Yeah. I mean, all this said, like I'm being doom and gloom about the IRS. I agree with paying taxes. Okay, yeah, it's part of my civic duty. I get it. I'm just saying, like, that's how much I respect it.
It's just a big shark.
That's how much I respect it.
Yeah. Other failures, I think, man, really just still taking on too much, knowing like moving into a project and knowing that I don't have the bandwidth for it, but kind of being patient with myself on that one, because there's a lot of years of just saying yes to everything.
Yeah.
And I also feel like I did a good job of actually turning down some good opportunities that didn't have the right timing.
Yeah. Not the
so
fit.
I can't really that's the thing, like failures, man. Like I look at failures as part of the process that we're in, and it's just like another learning tool.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's like we said, I think earlier in a podcast, we said, think about the things that you're not going to do, not about the things that you are going to do. Start there. And so that's a strong move.
Do you see any actual, did you have any fails?
Fails this year. One failed. It didn't seem that bad at the time, but it was a fail. It's actually, okay. Yeah, this is a pretty good little tangent, but I have 120 knives that are finished that I can't sell, and they're all scalpels. And it was like the first big batch I did of them. And the idea of the scalpel design was to circumnavigate surface grinding and water jet and just process actual steel bar stock into knives. And so the design lent itself to that. And so that was like process oriented design 101, was like trying to eliminate parts of the process that are outside of my shop that I can't control. And I ended up really taking it on the chin, because I thought maybe I could face mill them. Right. And the finish was working. But when they went to heat treat and came back, they warped to all hell. Like we're talking like boomerang
potato
shape.
Chips.
Yeah. And so, and I tried to straighten them, and they were too hard. They were ABL, and they were I took them pretty hard. They'd snap. And so that was kind of a fail, but ABL isn't a crazy expensive steel, and I didn't have that much time into them.
Yeah, but it's still time.
It's time.
Scaled.
But here's the real fail.
Okay.
I designed that knife for that to be the process to eliminate water jet and surface grinding.
Right.
And when that happened, I had not necessarily direct to customers, but I had like retailers that I'd kind of agreed to supply. And I told them, hold on, I got to do it again. And so I felt committed to continuing that knife. And I'd had them water jet and surface ground and made them, sold them. They worked out great. I love the knife. But it lost what its original purpose was, because the original purpose was to circumnavigate these other processes. And here's where the dilemma is if I'm going to have it water jet and surface ground and machined and stoned and blasted and tumbled, that's roughly the same amount of effort to make like an overland.
Yeah.
And so it felt like at the end of the year, like, wow, that was a massive distraction. Every scalpel I made could have been an overland or a confidant or something else. and yet it was like a really small, simple knife. And it kind of taught me a lesson of like, if you're going to put in X amount of work, like make the value proposition at the end of it actually something significant.
Yeah.
Because if you're putting the same amount of work, but the end result is like it's just not saleable at the same level,
yeah,
then I didn't like lose money on them. But overall, the project kind of like went off the rails.
Yeah.
And
that'll save you money in the long run though, because
Yeah.
I think there's what's the other valuable lesson in there would be like you extrapolated a process that you thought would work based on what you were doing, but you had enough changes in the process that it actually was not the same.
Yeah.
And you based sales and promises on an unproven process.
Yep, exactly.
That's the lesson, right?
Yep.
Like you have to prove the process before you can promise the product.
Yeah. And I didn't take payment, so I wasn't in a situation where I owed people knives.
Yeah.
But it was like I felt like verbally I owed people knives, and it led me down a rabbit hole that was unproductive. Yeah. It was way less productive than I could have been for most of the year. Because to catch up from that loss took me like months, because I then was slammed with overland orders, and I had to like cut my way through the overland orders and try to get these knives out. And it became like a confusing kind of problem. And in hindsight, like I can see that when they were all warped and stuff, A, I should never have told the retailers they were coming necessarily.
Right.
And B, I should have backed away from that design because it no longer was going to serve its intended purpose.
Yeah. Man, sometimes it's hard. It's hard to cut your losses though. You just want to, because again, it's not just the money. You started a project, you might really like the design. You want to finish it through. But again, I think that's an okay one for me, because if it's not just truly the bottom line, the fact that you got it done, those knives exist in the world, didn't have the profit margin that you would hope, didn't have the process that would make it that valuable, it actually creates like a different type of value, because now those knives are kind of a cool piece of history in your line, right? Something that in 10 years is going to be rare, right? And you learned a super valuable like process lesson from it.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's a win.
Yeah. And it's a design that I don't know how my business model is going to transition moving forward, but it's a design that I like enough where I could maybe hire an OEM to make it. That's possibly where it would slot, but I think I'm probably done making that knife for the reasons I talked about. Not because I don't want to make it and it's not profitable, but because I'd rather be making overlands, confidants, and a list of other items I have in mind, like maybe eventually a folder.
Yeah.
And it's like that knife kind of is
not
like
maybe eventually.
Yeah, eventually. Eventually a folder.
Clear that up. Yeah.
It was kind of dragging me away from like bigger goals I had.
Right. Yeah, those are.
Yeah.
I don't know. I spend a lot of time on those little goals, so it's like I have a slightly different opinion, but again, I'm not doing it at scale. Right. The things that I'm doing at scale, I'm trying to make as efficient as possible. I'm just allowing myself room to like fully play to get some of those more like kind of interest-driven projects out of my head.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So maybe that's what it becomes for you, is like you allow yourself some real R&D playtime just to like mess with weird ideas.
Yep.
You know, do a knife-like object.
Yep. Yeah. I've got some thoughts. I'm excited because like I said, I have the process for the overland like held tightly, and I feel like I have it refined. Yep. And I'm not super worried about like a massive thing coming out of a blind side, and they're not going to come back warped unless something changed with the steel metallurgy or something. Like my process works on that knife. So if I keep re-updating it into new designs, then I can start to put my brain power towards other processes, new things, moving forward.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue, man. Predictions, hopes for 2023.
You go first.
Man. I feel like this year set me up really well to move into really enjoyable work next year. I'm hyped about learning more CAD and CAM. Yeah. Like that is the most exciting thing on my horizon. I feel like all of the kind of slowdowns that I put into place are actually taking effect, and they're like giving me the time that I'm wanting. So the way that I see next year is kind of like, I want to focus on internal CAD CAM and manufacturing, like as the learning tool for like kind of that trinity, right? I just don't feel like as much, like if I really focus on CAD but don't take it through like making an efficient project in my own shop, I wouldn't get the full value from it. But like I think additionally that'll really help bump up some ideas that I have for like production design for, CRKT and Boker, and Burnley brand. Like I'm excited in there. Also just like the creative side, both Maddie and myself, are getting a little bit more time to really learn and develop skill sets. So I kind of am hoping for no crazy growth.
Yeah. Well, you've
I just
created
want to work.
Fertile ground for creativity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that I think that's like the big, I don't even know if that's like a prediction, man. It's just a hope. I hope that I've created a system,
the optimistic view of the 12 months ahead of us.
Yeah. Where I can actually work creatively. And just keep learning, man. I realize like if someone dropped, lottery winnings into my bank account, I would probably just spend all my time learning.
Yeah.
Something, it's like I'd go to school for architecture. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
So, that's a big one, man. More outside time with the boys. It's like not like you said, it's like, it's not knife, but it's such a big component.
No, I have the same goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
that's a big one.
We had my little boy, like I said, this year, and he kind of made it a little hard to have the outside time we usually like. We got a little baby, it kind of changes. Yeah. So next year, similar goal for me.
Delicate potato.
Yeah.
It's like, he's coming next year. He's coming into like the fun,
the toddler,
more
stuff.
Robust. You don't have to like worry about the neck as much.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
What about, okay. I'm trying to think if there's any other big ones. No, man. So, I'm like taking a creative coding class, and like, I just realized like all of it is around like expanding my skill set.
Yeah.
I don't know where it goes though. And that's super exciting.
Yeah.
Okay? What about yours?
So I spent 2 years building a process to make what I believe are high quality, cool fixed blades. I've got the process.
Yep.
I don't intend to change it too much. I feel like I've got it prototyped and refined. 2023, I'm going to find out at what RPM this process can operate at without overheating. And by overheating, I mean me overworking. You know what I mean? So I'm like,
are you going to push it? I mean, is this,
I'm going to push it a little bit.
Back to the namesake, man. Are you going to find the edge? Like, is that the goal?
A little bit.
All right.
I don't want to go crazy. Like I'm going to work like normal hours, but I want to see, like, cause I have to kind of order material and have it water jet and stuff. I want to see like how much can I feed through this process, and the quality is always going to be there, and how much can I float through here and get and execute and stay on top of it and not fall behind, essentially. And just see like, okay, now time for this process to like go full auto, and see like
do you have a kill switch?
Well, I mean, I just don't have to order as much steel. Like,
sure.
You know what I mean? For me, the measure is going to be like in my mind, I'm going to order X amount of steel thinking I can get it through.
Yep.
But if I can't, then I'm eventually going to have to stop ordering as much steel. Right. So it's like steel is like the mechanism for throttle in a sense.
I get it.
And I'm just going to see how fast and how quick do I need to get steel water jet to keep this thing moving.
Do you hire next year?
Part-time at least, for sure.
Okay. I think that's a really, I feel like I see that as as something coming down the line for you.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Cause that's, again, it's all learning. It's just like, that is such a different process.
Yeah. So I feel like this isn't my long-term plan to just like crank out these exact fixed blades forever.
Yep.
It's like, if I'm going to build the process and prototype it for 2 years, I'm now going to find out what can this process do when pushed. And then we'll see in 18 months, maybe I'll say, okay, I saw what it did.
Yeah.
now I'm going to tweak it, or I'm going to add this, or I'm going to go to folders, or I'm going to do X.
Yeah.
But for now, like, I'm making these knives and I'm going to make them efficiently and high quality the way I know how, and just see how it goes.
I like the idea of you being like Silencer Co. and just having, you're like, that's the production floor.
Yeah.
And this is my crazy R&D lab.
Yep.
Like,
Yep. Well, part of it is like for the employee thing we've talked about ad nauseum, but like I want more space to have a proper employee setup. And so my view is like, if this year I can execute the way I know how as a one-man shop, or maybe with some help, part-time or something, it can potentially finance the shop that I want. And then I can start to pivot, because right now it's kind of like turn and burn and get to where I need to be real estate wise.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like I can't do detours that slow down my progress towards the next shop. That's kind of like I'm on the straight and narrow. And for me, the most profitable mechanism that's working for me is to make these fixed blades right now.
Yep. All right.
So
stay the course.
We'll see.
All right. So, I mean, that's a little bit of this year.
Yeah.
And some thoughts on next year. Man, I'm excited. I'm excited to keep running the podcast too. And we've talked about kind of some areas we want to take that maybe, and some ideas. So
Yep.
It's going to be cool.
We want to spice this up a little bit, start adding some flavor, maybe with like some video eventually.
Do video, like try a Patreon maybe. Just kind of start to do some podcasty stuff so we can learn. Again, this is like totally new for us.
Yeah.
So kind of a fun, maybe we need an intro or an outro.
Yeah. Yeah. If we're going to do music for an intro and outro, what do you guys think? Like heavy metal, guitar, instrumental, like acoustic, or like drums?
I just like one tone.
Didgeridoo.
Whoa.
Yeah. Or science fictional, like synthesized.
Ooh, that's clicking with me right there.
There we go.
Incidentally, as like a parting shot, took the boys last night to see a movie with some of their friends, and we saw Puss in Boots.
Oh yeah,
and it was awesome.
Like the older one?
No, the new one.
Oh, I didn't know there was a new one.
It's so good. It was
like the Shrek one.
Yeah. So Puss in Boots as a character from Shrek in his own. I think Antonio Banderas is the voice, right? And I think I forget what his name is, but the actor from No Country for Old Men is a super interesting character.
Yeah. Sounds cool.
Really enjoyed it. So yeah, if you guys need like a post holiday, go see that movie.
Yeah.
Or by yourself. Dig it. All right, guys. Thanks for listening.
Thank you all.
Yep.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks for
Appreciate
sticking it out with us. Yep. Leave us a review, shoot us questions. Big goal for me, I guess, next year also is to include you guys more. We need to do some have them send in questions and do a Q&A.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Take it to the next level.
All right. Sounds good. All right, man. Happy New Year, and we'll talk soon.
Peace.